Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video. Okay, very quickly, because I have not talked about this yet and I feel like I should, but I run a Substack newsletter. Over the summer, I've been using it as a platform to run a book club, and the book club will be continuing on a more seasonal basis. But in the meantime, I've been also using that platform to do more personal writing, to create lists of reading materials of movies that I'm interested in, recommendations, and also as a place to share smaller, like informal essays. If you're interested, you can just check it out. But thanks everyone. Let's get to the video. Cheating is a tale as old as time, quite literally. In Greek mythology, there are countless stories of cheating. One of my favorite myths is the one where Zeus turns his mistress into a cow to throw his rightfully enraged wife off her scent. Shakespeare's Othello was driven to madness by the paranoia of his wife cheating on him, eventually killing her by the end of the play. Infidelity always has and continues to be a popular plot development in literature and movies, from The Scarlet Letter to Sabrina to Titanic to You've Got Mail to The Notebook to the highest form of art of them all, challengers. All to say, we've been conditioned into watching and reading infidelity stories for entertainment.
I know you've been cheating on me.
And so it's no wonder why we're captivated by cheating. Obviously, if it ever involves ourselves, but also if it involves other people as well. And in this day and age, it doesn't even matter if the cheating actually happened, just the implication of it is enough to get people excited. For example, last year, Sabrina Carpenter and Barry Keoghan's heavily publicized relationship ended in December 2024, with Barry deleting his Instagram account after getting accused of cheating on Sabrina. Now, where do these accusations even come from? There was honestly not that much evidence. Some might say there was no evidence. The girl that everyone thought Barry was cheating with clarified that the rumors were false and that nothing happened.
No, I did not get with Barry. I have never even encountered this man in my life.
The actual statement from some insider on their breakup was that they're both just young and career focused. But that didn't matter. The internet had taken the bait and someone needed to be punished. On December 7th, Barry made a statement on X about how these attacks were starting to encroach on his family's safety. Knocking on my granny's door, sitting outside my baby boy's house, intimidating them, that's crossing a line. A number of people replied to Barry's post, brushing off his concerns about his family to get to the bottom line. So, did you cheat? Another person said, I feel like you could have said sorry in here somewhere, but okay. Sorry to who exactly? Does Barry need to be apologizing to us as if we're his girlfriend? And even if Barry did cheat on Sabrina, saying sorry to her through a tweet would be absolutely insane. I feel like people don't even know what they're asking for at this point. Ethan Slater and Ariana Grande faced similar backlash with cheating speculations. In 2023, the Daily Mail reported that the two were seen all over each other on the set of Wicked and at Michelle Yeoh's Oscar party, all before Ethan was separated from his ex-wife, Lily J. The source went on to make the claim that Ari and her then-husband Dalton would even go on double dates with Ethan and Lily. I remember at this time, everyone was bringing up Ariana's song, Break Up With Your Girlfriend, I'm Bored, as evidence of her grotesque attitudes towards homewrecking.
She says she knows it isn't right, and that she doesn't care.
While Ariana Grande hasn't addressed the exact allegations, she has mentioned to Vanity Fair that the popular narrative is not how it actually went down. She said, the most disappointing part was to see so many people believe the worst version of it. That was definitely a tough ride. As a result of this backlash, Ethan and Ariana have understandably laid low, and the subsequent Wicked press tour, which ended earlier this year, emphasized the main co-stars, Ariana and Cynthia Erivo's, friendship, chemistry, and emotional bond.
I didn't know that was happening.
I've seen it on a couple posts.
I'm sure part of this marketing decision was to deflect negative press from Ariana's love life. Meanwhile, Lily J actually published an article in December that mostly focused on how publicity has affected her career and how she now fears that the rumors will harm her credibility as a therapist. So I think it's important to remember that while online users may think they're supporting the victim of the situation, they most likely are not and are just participating in the celebrity media circus of it all. But again, why do we even care so much about a problem that doesn't actually involve any of us personally? And why is our understanding of infidelity lacking in so much nuance? Cartoons Hate Her explains on their Substack how the internet views cheating. Cheating is evil and cheaters are evil. Cheaters are innately evil and cannot be reformed. Cheating never happens because of any problems in the relationship, and the blame always falls specifically on the cheater, no matter what happened prior to the cheating. Cheaters should be shunned from society for life. In reality, hot take, but please walk with me here, cheating is not that black and white of an issue. Renowned relationship therapist Esther Perel wrote an iconic piece for The Atlantic titled "Why Happy People Cheat," and she goes on to explain that she doesn't subscribe to the symptom theory or this idea that infidelity must be a symptom of something wrong in the relationship. Perel writes, "The intricacies of love and desire don't yield to simple categorizations of good and bad, victim and perpetrator." Shannon Keating echoed these sentiments for her article, "Why Are We Still So Scandalized by Cheating?" She writes, "It's one thing to think that cheating in the abstract is a clear wrong, but it's another thing entirely to consider it across the board without qualifications as an act of abuse and deserving of social, professional, and even carceral consequences." As just a concrete example to drive this point, someone cheating because they're stuck in an abusive relationship and afraid of divorcing their abusive spouse is much different from someone cheating because they have no respect for their partner. In saying all this, the purpose I have for this video is to examine our attitudes towards cheating in the public sphere. I personally do not care about Sabrina and Barry or Ariana and Ethan. I'm fine not ever knowing their full stories because it's none of my business. And ultimately, I do think cheating is wrong. And I would personally not recommend any of my friends to date a cheater, regardless of why they cheated, even though I believe in everyone's ability to reform. But that's just how I feel personally. I can talk about that more at length on another day. But for this video, I want to focus on our relationship to cheating on the public stage because on a societal level, I think cheating is not on its own something that anyone should be humiliated for on a massive scale. And actually, it's just not something at all that we, the public, should be involved in. And yet we are. So why is that?
Cheating scandal surfaced with Kristen Thompson.
I don't even know how to describe it besides it's just so up.
This couple was caught on the big screen at the Coldplay concert.
Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
This is a kiss cam catastrophe.
Any CEO that cheats on his wife will be fired because that is the ultimate betrayal.
I might actually have gone on with your cheating and your bullshit if your attitude around here had been even the least bit loving.
I use Squarespace for my book club website, and I love it because of how easy and customizable the platform is. I've been really happy with the basic features thus far, but I recently started looking into the platform's CSS capabilities just to add a touch more uniqueness, and I've been using Squarespace forums to self-teach myself, and honestly, it's just been awesome. Everyone is just super helpful. Squarespace has really streamlined the site building process, and their community features are just the cherry on top. But on top of having a snazzy looking website, Squarespace offers so many different analytics you can really check on every single aspect of your site and see who's been meandering there, which is super helpful if you're using your website as part of your brand building. Speaking of brand building, if I ever decide to sell merch, it will be going up on this Squarespace. The platform makes it super easy to list products, connect a payment processor, and streamline customer emails. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Mina to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Okay, I would say that a lot of our anger towards celebrity cheating is magnified when the perpetrator is someone who has a large fan base, especially a large fan base of female fans. John Mulaney is the perfect example.
Please welcome John Mulaney.
I'm not a man.
Mulaney is a beloved comedian who rose to fame based on his good guy stand-up sets. He had, boy next door looks and a somewhat dorky and earnest demeanor, marking him, visually at least, as unthreatening and wholesome.
Women will see me as a threat. That is funny. Yeah, that is silly. That is silly.
As writer Kaylee Donaldson sums up, to be frank, Mulaney is extremely easy to infantilize. And I fully drink this Kool-Aid. For better or for worse, I have always had a soft spot for effeminate men. That is also something that can be unpacked on a later day, but one of Mulaney's defining bits was that he would always refer to his then wife, Anna Marie Tendler, with reverence.
I love and respect my wife very much.
separating him from the legions of male comedians who came before him who tend to punch down on their wives.
I never wanted to be a husband.
I remember one of the earliest pieces of John Mulaney content I saw on the internet was a GIF set of his 2015 stand-up show, The Comeback Kid, where he joyously shouts, "That's my wife." But in 2022, Mulaney and Tendler got divorced. Donaldson reported at the time, the responses to Mulaney's split and new love seemed unusually frantic. Some cried that love was dead. Others lamented how Mulaney didn't seem like that kind of guy. He just loved his wife so much. How could he do this to her? How could he do this to us? Media studies professor Amanda Herberg explained to Vox that Mulaney's star persona really came to represent a rejection of both traditional toxic gender roles and the necessity of children in defining a successful, meaningful marriage. It goes without saying that this is connected especially with millennial women for whom ideas of domestic bliss look very different than they did for their parents' and grandparents' generations. Okay, I should clarify. While there's been no proof that Mulaney cheated on Tendler, people were upset by the fact that it was Mulaney who dumped Tendler after building a platform off of being a wife guy.
He would always talk about how much he loves his wife. You know what John Mulaney did? He went to rehab and immediately divorced her.
And while Tendler was grieving and sharing emotional art on her Instagram, he had swiftly moved on with the younger, hotter Olivia Munn, who admitted that she had had a crush on Mulaney for a while. To make matters worse, Mulaney had apparently told Tendler that he didn't want kids.
People always ask us, are you gonna have kids? And we say no.
But now has 2 children with Munn.
We're having a baby together.
Neither of them have divulged the nitty-gritty details of their marriage, but it didn't matter anymore. People began to form a parasocial relationship with Tendler herself, seeing this poor woman as a symbol of heartbreak, female pain, and abandonment. Around the same time, former Try guy Ned Fulmer was caught making out with his employee Alexandra Herring in New York City, an actual proven cheating scandal because he was and is still married to Ariel Fulmer. Ned, like Mulaney, branded himself as a wife guy. He constantly mentioned his wife and even had a bobbleheaded figurine that said "my wife" as merch.
My wife?
My wife.
My wife, Ariel.
My wife.
My wife is awesome.
Ned loves his wife.
Zoe Aiko Sonnenberg, a journalist who studied the Try Guys for the months leading up to the scandal. This is real journalism, guys. She writes, the success of the Try Guys' brand has less to do with their shtick itself than with their performance of authenticity. The promise that the character on screen and the human behind the character are largely the same. This is especially true in their personas as good guys, kind and inquisitive and genuine men navigating the world before our eyes. They're less actors than people you know, in appearance at least. This is the fundamental draw of the channel, and when the facade fell away online this week, the fandom reacted in kind.
Ned, are there any secrets that you're hiding from us?
Don't think so.
That's a lie.
Unlike actors such as Jude Law and singers like Adam Levine, their personal relationships do not necessarily affect their ability to act or to sing. Even John Mulaney, who straddles the line between personality and artist, is able to recuperate his career because he has a talent that people like, and he's able to actually write jokes unrelated to loving his wife. Surprise! His 2023 stand-up show, Baby J, avoids the divorce issue entirely in favor of diving deep into his addiction issues.
Do you know how bad of a drug problem you have to have? If when you open a door and see people gathered, your first and immediate thought is probably an intervention about my drug problem.
It was his effort to reconcile who he was seen as with who he is. And it was pretty well received by critics and fans alike. But when it comes to just being a straight up personality, your personal behavior has a direct correlation with how likable you are to your fan base and therefore does affect your career. It makes absolute sense to me why the other Try Guys would axe Fulmer's role because he was now unfit to be Ned, the Try Guy, a character who's super into his wife. Even though it's ironic because Ned and Ariel are still together, so I assume they've worked out their issues privately. And in that case, the actual victim of the situation has forgiven him, but the uninvolved fans are still mad about it. Granted, I was never a Try Guy watcher, so I can't really say how I feel about Ned Fulmer getting fired on a personal level. Obviously, I understand why, because he could no longer be the character he created, as I mentioned, and it is pretty bad that he hooked up with his employee, of all people. Talia is Not Cool has a video essay on this scandal, and she made an interesting point that Ned was using his wife as a branding tool and a way to insulate himself from criticism. His use of his wife as a symbol could be seen as exploitative to garner support and views, because it it did not translate into actually treating her well. Again, I don't know Ned personally, and this could be totally wrong, and I do believe in complex people. So I think it also is possible to really love your wife, but still do things to hurt her. So Ned, the try guy, the wife lover character, could have come from an authentic place. Regardless, this is what the optics were, and the internet does not like complex things, and Ned becomes a parable for fake nice guys, the kinds who deceive women into thinking they're feminists when really they treat women terribly. Again, not saying Ned treats women terribly, but I think this is just the kind of societal paranoia that his story contributed to and is only bolstered by the ongoing meme of performative feminist men who masquerade as caring about women's issues, even sometimes wearing women's wear to come across as gender progressive and non-threatening, all in order to sleep with them and dump them afterwards like any other guy.
Who taught you, John, I suppose?
No, I taught John, as it happens.
Or feminism, even in love.
Needless to say, I think a major reason for our outrage towards celebrity cheating scandals is because these scandals reaffirm our anxieties about patriarchy. People online were pointing out this disturbing trend of men getting famous and then leaving their longtime girlfriends and wives, such as the cases of Barry Keoghan, Ethan Slater, Jeremy Allen White, Ryan Reynolds, Taika Waititi, Benjamin Millepied, etc., etc. For many of these cases, cheating has never been confirmed and rumors are dubious, but I think people are critical of what they believe to be a man leaving his long-term partner for a hot and famous celebrity, making their non-famous wives seem disposable, especially when they're mothers.
Gets the Golden Globe, gets the Vanity Fair cover, boom. Like, you blow up your life.
I know.
And
that's kind of how we felt about it,
very
too.
It's like very Hollywood.
One may ask, who cares? Are that many of us in a position of dating hot and upcoming actors who could potentially fall victim to this trend and leave us? I don't think so. But while we may be immune to this particular problem, feminists have long argued that the personal is political, meaning that specific relationships, sex lives in general, they do not exist in a vacuum, and so they cannot be separated from the patriarchy. So it's less that we're afraid our husbands will leave us for Sabrina Carpenter, but that these cases reinforce the patriarchal notion that no matter what you do, our husbands are superficial to their cores and will chase a hotter younger woman if given the chance.
You're married.
I am? Yes, I am.
This fear of men's superficiality is also why, during the time of Lemonade, many women were lamenting who would possibly cheat on Beyonce.
Beyonce.
I understand where people are coming from when they say things like this, but the core of this idea is the belief that if you're a perfect enough woman, you won't be cheated on, which implies still that it is a woman's responsibility to not be cheated on at the end of the day. But it's also easy to see why people fall into this logic. According to early 2000s research, women tend to report infidelity as being related to relationship dissatisfaction, whereas men often described extramarital involvement as more about their desire for sexual excitement. These conclusions imply that women cheat because their husbands are bad and men cheat because they want more than what their perfect wife has to offer and are therefore insatiable.
All right, so I cheat. I used to cheat. I'm not getting spayed.
And now, this isn't to say that women never do wrong. JoJo Siwa was accused of cheating on her partner, Kath Ebbs, with her Celebrity Big Brother UK co-star, Chris Hughes, and faced backlash for a myriad of reasons, for allegedly cheating, for lying about being a lesbian, which I don't really think is fair because sexuality is complicated and not always easy to understand for everyone, and also for her and Hughes' cringe behavior online, which is something I unfortunately cannot defend. I also cannot defend whatever this Betty Davis Eyes autotune monstrosity is. But Ebbs said following the scandal, they have felt the most depressed they've been in 6 years. Bottom line, women can also induce harm. According to Michelle Shankman, unequal power dynamics can create many problems. I don't know the situation between Kath and JoJo intimately, but JoJo did have much more fame than Kath, which I think does skew their relationship a bit. In traditional straight relationships, implicit gender roles can lead to these power dynamics pretty easily. Shankman writes, when power in a relationship is unequal, there is an implicit dynamic of a top dog and an underdog. The top dog is unable to be vulnerable for fear of showing weakness, and the underdog must hold back for fear of upsetting the balance, making intimacy nearly impossible to achieve. But we could go further. Lauren Rosewarne's book, Cheating on the Sisterhood, explores the gender politics of cheating. So, for instance, to her, a married man and a single woman infidelity pairing is actually disempowerment for both the wife and the mistress. She notes that the word mistress is apt. It implies literally catering to the needs of a married man. In this dynamic, the man wields power through his choice between two women and his ability to set the terms of each relationship, putting each woman into a position of diminished agency. Also, usually in the scenario, the man is older and richer, using his proximity to power to entice a younger woman who is not as advantaged. Rosewarne describes the mistress as a commodity that powerful men can afford. In this case, the mistress is getting sexually exploited. So, Gloria Blanchfield Thomas defines sexual exploitation as using someone sexually for one's own self-centered purposes, regardless of what destructive effect this might have on the other. Sexual exploitation is robbing someone after you've gotten what you want sexually. It is using a person as a sexual object. And you may be thinking, how is it exploitative when the mistress is a consenting adult? Well, Rosewarne argues that just because women can gain sexual pleasure doesn't mean they aren't being exploited. She references Simone de Beauvoir's argument that women have learned to take pleasure in their own subordination. In these types of dynamics, the men also tend to emotionally exploit their mistresses with the whole, "my wife doesn't understand me like you" platitude. When men talk shit about their wives to their mistresses, Rosewarne writes, it is quite likely that the single woman will do whatever she can to avoid resembling the woman that he is cheating on. This may involve repressing emotions, being uncharacteristically sexually uninhibited, or walking on eggshells around him. Such behavior is unlikely to aid self-esteem and is very likely to impede sexual equality by helping to promote the repressive image of the good woman. Every so often I'll come across a crazy take that given the history of men cheating, it's actually feminist for women to cheat. Which brings to mind a scene from the 2006 film Little Children, in which the protagonist Sarah participates in a book club discussion of Gustave Flaubert's novel Madame Bovary. And she says,
"In her own strange way, Emma Bovary is a feminist."
Oh, that's nice. So now cheating on your husband makes you a feminist?
No. It's not the cheating. It's the hunger. The hunger for an alternative. And the refusal to accept a life of unhappiness.
For some feminists, and I feel like this is an extension of my arch nemesis, choice feminism, being able to prioritize our own individual happiness regardless of the harm it causes is considered a radical act. Doubly when women are able to, quote, have sex like a man, which usually translates to having sex without feelings involved and often enough. I've always thought this was a pretty silly take because it takes like the worst approach to equality. Like, rather than expecting men to be emotionally mature and be better individuals, we're calling for women to be more emotionally immature and be worse individuals. It's a very pessimistic outlook, I think. But I think we've all also drawn the wrong assumption that every liberal-seeming woman, especially a celebrity, is a feminist and lives by and dies by the feminist sword and uplifts sisterhood and never does anything to cater to the patriarchy. Hence why Sabrina Carpenter's album cover received so much backlash, because people had these kind of expectations for her. But living the feminist way 24/7 is something that not even outspoken feminists are able to do. Rosewarne herself was the other woman in a marriage, and she explained in an interview, ideally, of course, it is in the best interest of feminism for single women not to get involved with married men. But idealism is a very different thing from reality. While we can, of course, choose whether we act on our emotions, individuals make decisions for a suite of reasons, not just politics. In any case, I made a selfish decision that exploited my own priorities at that time in my life. Evidently, my feminism proved lower down on that list than some other priorities, like being in an intimate relationship. Once again, I think there can be a lot of nuance to cheating discourse. I'd love to ask, a mistress why feminism is lower down on their list of priorities. Maybe not in that kind of loaded language because I feel like that's really offensive. But people hate talking and unpacking the reasons why someone might do something bad. It's just much easier to name the crime and enact the punishment. And that's also the kind of culture that our society breeds as well.
This is the big bad world full of mean people where nasty things happen.
Now you tell me.
In 2013, there was a highly publicized Gallup poll, which surveyed 1,535 people. The poll gathered information on Americans' moral approval of topics like assisted suicide, the death penalty, having a baby out of wedlock, gay or lesbian relations, among others. Infidelity had the lowest approval rating, even compared to a number of controversial topics on the list, like polygamy and human cloning. Human cloning is less controversial than cheating. I'm honestly shocked. The result was the same as the poll's previous iteration in 2001, but the disapproval rating is nearly twice what it was 40 years before that. A number of publications weighed in on the poll results. I loved what the Huffington Post had to say. They argued that infidelity's vast disapproval rating is because it is a stand-in for lying, especially lying to someone you've sworn loyalty to. I think that's why progressives are generally okay with polyamory and open relationships, because these relationship models imply that all parties are in the know of what's happening. There is no deception involved. Hugo Schweizer commented on the poll results for The Atlantic, pointing out that changing ideas towards marriage has made it so marriage is now a part of individual happiness rather than for the purposes of baby making or communal stability, as it once was. He mentions Karen Swallow Prior, who wrote about how young people are marrying later because they see marriage as a capstone to a well-ordered life, rather than a cornerstone upon which to build. This new way of viewing marriage is, quote, much less forgiving of sexual betrayal because it presumes that those who finally get around to marrying should be mature enough to be both self-regulating and scrupulously honest.
Unless you're well mated, this business of marriage is much overrated.
I understand that completely. I've been in the same relationship since I was 23, but I think I apply this kind of rhetoric to my friendships. You know, because every so often I'll encounter someone who is just incredibly rude. But usually if they're younger than me, like in their early 20s, I'm able to rationalize it in my head. Like, oh, it's just because they're young. They have yet to learn life's lessons. Meanwhile, if the person being rude to me is in their 30s, it's like super disorienting because I guess I just go through life with the assumption that anyone who's reached a certain stage of adulthood, let's say 25, should be mature and normal. So in a similar vein, dating around when you're 21, okay, it's a bit more acceptable to be all over the place. But if you're in your 30s, there's an expectation that you know how to handle yourself in a relationship. I think we also want to believe that people can be easily separated into good versus bad. I try to challenge myself when I catch myself categorizing people like this. For example, thinking everyone who is 30 plus should be good when really someone's maturity level or self-awareness can come at any age or never come at all. But we are a culture obsessed with morality. That's the bottom line that I want to say. Conservatives are obviously historically obsessed with traditional and religious ideas of morality, regularly targeting anyone who deviates from the norm. Did you know that up until 1973, men could legally justify killing their wives if she was committing adultery in Texas? But liberals are also obsessed with morality, though I'd argue in a less overtly violent way. When it comes to issues like cancel culture, liberals feel an urgency to align with goodness and cast away evil. And I think part of the reason for this is that we all know deep down that meritocracy is a lie and people get to high places because of their connections and where they're born and what kind of money they were born into. Yet we still want to believe that the people who have made it deserve their spot and are at least good people. There's a sense of injustice when a bad guy gets to capitalize on being a good guy, as is, I guess, the narrative with Ned Fulmer, or in general, when a person is beloved by millions, but actually hurting those in her private life, as is the case with Ariana Grande. I also read this Substack essay by Anna Babb, who commented on the recent season of Love Island USA's controversy. The SparkNotes recap is that in July, before the season finished, one of the contestants, Sierra Ortega, was kicked off the show because posts of her using the C slur resurfaced. She used the term to describe the shape of her eyes pre-Botox. Ultimately, when it comes to the public response, we all have our own personal boundaries on what we will accept from celebrities, and these boundaries guide our moral compasses and help us rationalize the world to seem less chaotic. Racism is bad. So we should deplatform every racist, and that will make us feel like the world, or at least my world, is controlled and not racist. But Babb raises an interesting point. Ironically, as fans called for the contestants' heads in the name of social justice, they remained oblivious to the internal biases shaping their opinions in the first place. For example, Charlee and Alondria, two black women displaying the patience levels of stoic therapists during the season's biggest arguments, were branded as bullies over a minor friendship dispute in a single episode, causing the women to lose around 50,000 followers combined. What is the impact of outlawing slurs if the prejudices behind the language continue to shape our actions and, by extension, our society? We have to question whether or not our incessant need to uphold morality is actually maybe counterproductive. There are different ways racism manifests, right? And by treating someone who used a slur out of genuine ignorance the same way we treat someone who used a slur because they are literally a white nationalist, we are robbing ourselves of being able to enact actual change. Rain Fisher-Kwan really said it best in her essay, Here We Go Again and Again and Again. In the essay, Rain addresses the Adam Levine scandal. So bring it back to cheating. The reason I wanted to bring up the Sierra situation in the first place was because I think it is a perfect example of how the internet sees canceling. But anyway, in 2022, Levine cheated on his wife, Bahati, with a number of women, including Instagram model Sumner Stroh, who was between ages like 19 to 21 when Levine slid into her DMs. This incident is where that joke, that body of yours is absurd, originates from. It was like a crazy text message that Levine had sent another Instagram model, America, who came forward after Stroh shared her story. Well, Levine was mostly made fun of, as I said, in this like kind of lighthearted way for being cringy. Stroh was being slandered with labels like whore and slut. She was facing dehumanizing comments about her body, and her claims against Adam were being largely discredited due to her OnlyFans presence and, also vocal fry. The desire for these people to uphold the morality of a monogamous relationship led them to weaponizing misogyny and pitting the two women against each other in this like age-old battle of Madonna versus whore. Rain begs the question, what power could you possibly fighting when you take the same philosophical and political position as the Puritan churches of the 18th century, that there is no end to the humiliation and punishment that a sexually deviant woman can deserve? Rain also expressed frustration in that when she brought up how Sumner did not deserve this mass public shaming campaign and harassment on Twitter, people discredited her main argument and instead accused her of excusing cheating. Okay, I agree with Rain that as a society, we are obsessed with this like spectacle of punishment rather than nurturing empathy and allowing redemption. She writes that as a result of this societal thinking, there will always be a woman who we feel deserves to be punished. There will always be a woman placed between the public crosshairs who reminds you of the girl who bullied you in middle school, or who you think talks like a liar, or who did the one thing by which your personal moral compass cannot abide. If she ever gets absolved of her crimes, there will be another worse woman waiting to be next. I really hang on to that phrase, a woman who reminds you of the girl who bullied you in middle school, because I think so many of our attitudes towards celebrity scandals are projections based on our own life experiences and this need to rectify the wrongdoings in our own lives. We may never get the justice we deserve from our ex-boyfriends cheating on us, but maybe we can deplatform Ethan Slater and that will feel like a tiny justice, not just for Lily J, but for the culture at large. To deplatform someone rich and famous for cheating is to make the biggest statement possible that this is not acceptable behavior. Ultimately, audiences gain a comforting sense of certainty when they decide that a celebrity has cheated and that the celebrity, therefore, has an easily categorized moral alignment. Daniel Heller-Roazen wrote a book, The Enemy of All, which in the original context, he's referring to pirates as the original enemy of humankind, but I think what he has to say can relate to cheaters as well. The reason why the pirate is so terrifying is that they exist outside of the laws of nations and are therefore a threat not just to individuals, but to the boundaries of states themselves. Cheaters and homewreckers exist as not just a threat to you and your relationship, but to a sense of order and the sanctity of the monogamous relationship, which promises partners the security of being the only one their partner loves. If Ariana Grande is out here stealing boyfriends left and right, no one is safe. If Beyonce can be cheated on, so can the rest of us. And furthermore, the fact that there are so many cheaters out there today means that theoretically, any monogamous relationship could be infiltrated. Unfortunately, any philosopher, any statistic will show that humans are not like just distinct certain categories. And real life and real relationships are actually very messy. There is no one size fits all. Going back to Esther Perel, who charts the complex motivations behind cheating, cheating can be an act of existential reckoning, a part of self-definition and exploration, a confusing and unknowable impulse. Happy people can and do cheat. The more I've listened to these tales of improbable transgression, from one-night stands to passionate love affairs, the more I've sought alternate explanations. One of the most uncomfortable truths about an affair is that what for partner A may be an agonizing betrayal may be transformative for partner B. Understanding both sides is crucial, whether a couple chooses to end the relationship or intends to stay together to rebuild and revitalize. You know, as humans, we love categories. We love categorizing women as Madonnas or whores. We love categorizing ourselves into aesthetic categories of cottagecore or clean girl. We love categorizing people into their specific careers, like finance bro and fashion girly. And we love categorizing people into cheaters and non-cheaters. These labels help us understand the world because actual communication and getting to know people takes risk and effort. As Bab explains, demonizing others for unintentional prejudice conveniently distracts us from our own in the short term. But in the long run, it makes us afraid to face ourselves. But by allowing space for well-intentioned people to unlearn in public, we might create space to confront our biases without shame. Bab is unpacking this via the lens of racism cancellations, but I think the same advice can apply to how we look at cheating scandals. If we fail to understand the myriad of reasons why someone might cheat, which is what we do when we create like blanket statements like Ariana Grande is hot and a pick-me, or Ned Fulmer actually hates his wife, we actually are then unequipped to handle cheating or really any relationship problems if or when they come up in our own lives. But if we allow ourselves the grace to understand, then we can properly diagnose what is fixable and what crosses a personal boundary. And we can even move forward away from that relationship, feeling like we properly know ourselves better. This is the end of the video, guys. Thanks so much for sticking around, listening to me chat. I know I was talking about something quite controversial this time. So I'd love to hear your respectful opinions, open to disagreeing respectfully. But yeah, on that note, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.